Welcome everyone to another episode of The Jar. And this week I thought I would take a look at some wrestling news. Some very interesting stuff has happened here lately, or at least some interesting stuff that I feel needs to be reported on. Some of this, actually, most of this, if not all of this, has been reported by other YouTubers, but I kind of wanted to throw at least my opinions and obviously the facts out there for listeners of my channel to kind of, keep everybody informed and whatnot. So I want to start off the bat with a little known kind of incident going around lately about this independent wrestler that recently got stabbed at a independent show. And so I wanted to detail the reports of this indie wrestler being stabbed at a obviously an indie show. But the person in question is wrestler by the name of Cruel Kruger, Krule Krugger, and it was at a Ruthless Pro Wrestling's Omega show in Berwyn, Illinois, which, in case you don't know, Berwyn is like it's like the arena, essentially, like the only place that really, any kind of stage for pro wrestling in that area. And because of the incident, I'm gonna go into detail. Because of the incident, there has been a lot of speculation and, well, media coverage based on what went on. And the long and short of it is this wrestler, Cruel Kruger, was not interacting, he was wrestling in a match, and apparently after the match he went to his merch table, to start selling his merchandise and try to make a little extra money, as wrestlers have been doing since, I don't know, since like the 1940s, 1930s maybe. But either way, he was selling his merch. And I feel like I should back up a little bit. Supposedly, the fan in question approached Cruel at the beginning of the show at his merch table, asked him how much the merch was, and then when Cruel Kruger told him, he basically said, "I'm not effing paying for that," and then just kind of turned his back and walked off or whatever. And that was basically it, if I'm not mistaken. And then after the main event, which Cruel Kruger was a part of, the show was over, and so he went back to his merch booth and was trying to sell merchandise, and was apparently approached by the same individual again. And I guess they had some words exchanging, and then the fan tackled Kruger into the table, like the merch table. And at that point, I think some other wrestlers stepped in, was trying to break it up and keep them apart. And supposedly that's when the fan in question stabbed Kruger, and I think it was the abdomen area. So that went on, and a lot of, not necessarily a lot, but several wrestlers came out and in defense of Cruel, like on social media and whatnot. There's at least one or two wrestlers. I know Mickey Knuckles is one. She came out on social media and basically gave her side of the story, saying that the altercation happened, and then when her and several other wrestlers tried to separate them, they noticed that Kruger was stabbed in the abdomen. And there's at least one one witness at the show that said they don't believe the stabbing really happened. They believe that it is what it is, but they believe that the stabbing was fabricated. And so now, since that incident, a lot of media and social media and fans and wrestling journalists and even sports journalists, like I think ESPN, have all covered this incident in not necessarily great detail, but they've definitely covered it and People have released information about it, and opinions and stuff are going to fly everywhere, obviously, because nowadays opinions are considered news, but it is what it is. Anyway, there was a lot of speculation. Like I said, at least one witness believed that the stabbing didn't occur. And like I said, there was Mickey Knuckles who came out in defense of Kruger and stuff like that. And there was also he was also defended by a couple of other wrestlers that were in attendance. I can't necessarily think of their names right now in the report I'm reading from, which is sports.yahoo.com. Just kind of want to give some citations so that way I'm not stealing other people's work and things like that, plagiarizing, I guess. But yeah, there was a few people that, like I said, that came out in defense of him, and then there were a few people who were like, that stabbing was BS. So about a week passes, like 8 days, and finally a report comes out. Again, I'm on Yahoo Sports. Another report comes out detailing the stabbing at the Midwest Indie Show, and basically the article here says Aidan Gibbons of Cultaholic released an exclusive report post-incident where several witnesses, including wrestlers working with the independent show with Cruel, recalled what happened. Lou Nixon, a deathmatch wrestler, told the publication that the incident between the alleged attacker and Cruel began earlier in the evening and continued throughout the night, including Cruel's match with Schlock for the RPW Rust Belt Deathmatch World Championship. Cruel told me that the guy went up to the merch stand at the start of the show, started asking Cruel how much his merchandise was, and then went, "I'm not effing paying that," then walked away, Nixon said. The guy was front row during Cruel's entrance, and he's like a big monster. He walks around. The guy stepped out in front row and stepped in front of Cruel on his entrance and kind of squared up to him. Cruel obviously didn't break character and made him look silly, and then during the match, I think like the guy got knocked out of his seat, which is again part of this report. After the event concluded, Nixon noted that tensions escalated from verbal taunts to a physical throwdown. The guys went up to Cruel's merch table at the end of the show and squared up to him and started going, "Let's effing go then, let's effing go." And he tackled him into the table with the merch, and that's when he must have shanked him because Cruel didn't realize he got stabbed until after. Several wrestlers ran in and defended Cruel, who was stabbed in the lower right quadrant of his abdomen, according to Mickey Knuckles, another wrestler who witnessed the attack firsthand, which I just mentioned that Nikki defended him. Despite the situation going from zero to firing from all cylinders, one anonymous source told Cultaholic that they will agree there were fisticuffs on both sides. Cruel was not stabbed during the fight. They believe that portions of the story was invented as a way to save face and to not look bad on the internet. "I don't believe that there was a knife in play," the anonymous source began. "I never saw a knife, I never saw a stabbing, and I don't believe that any of the wrestlers saw a knife. I really genuinely think they wanted to help their friend." Later in the interview, the source added more to the theory. "In wrestling, it's notoriously a thing that when a fan attacks a wrestler, it becomes essentially, at a point in wrestling, legalized brutality, right? I don't think that's the case anymore. I think after the incident happened and they let the guy walk away, I think they quickly realized that they needed to tell a story to save face and to not look bad on the internet. And this is where the stabbing story comes from. I don't think it actually occurred. No one tried to disarm this guy, and if they did, you don't see that in the video. And the guy was just allowed to walk out of the building. Why wasn't he stopped by a police? Why hasn't there been a police report? Why wasn't this guy arrested? And why are there a lot of questions about it for sure? There are a lot of questions about it for sure. And the article continues to go on, but I mean, honestly, that's kind of the gist of it. I'm pretty sure people understand that what went on. The wrestler in question, Cruel, has since released on, I think, social media, or at least released some kind of statement saying that he is okay, and that, like, no severe or permanent injuries or anything like that, I believe, is something along his statement, and reassuring people that he was okay. But I mean, that source does bring up a good couple of questions. Why wasn't there a police report? Why wasn't the guy arrested? Just what the hell? Why was it literally just allowed to leave? Why wasn't he bombarded by security or police or anything and just escorted out of the building into a police car and then taken to jail, or at least to the police station? It There's a lot of questions and a lot of things that kind of baffle me, and not just me, but as you can tell, a lot of the people that are surrounding this incident, at least a few of them have questions that they're not getting satisfactory answers to, apparently. But the reason why I wanted to kind of talk about that is so I could give everyone an up to date kind of idea of what's going on. Now, the reason why I believe that the source is correct in saying that the incident is fabricated is because I think, yeah, they're trying to save the company and the wrestler, in this case, Kruger. I think they're trying to save him from like a lawsuit or something, saying that he was not only attacked but stabbed by the fans, so he was simply defending himself. But in the video, it the video raises too many questions because it doesn't completely align with the story that's being told by the wrestlers in the company and things like that. And simply put, that incident has caused this place in Illinois to just be like, you know what? No more wrestling shows here. And in fact, GCW, Game Changer Wrestling, had several, I don't know if it was several events or at least one event they had scheduled at that exact arena. And then within a couple days, it got canceled and there's no more wrestling that's going to be held in that venue. So GCW released a report saying that they're going to have to reschedule, and a new venue and time will be released when they can get it, when it'll be released when it's available, basically. And so I bring all that up because this isn't the first time incidents like this happened, where wrestlers have been attacked by fans and things like that. I mean, for God's sake, listen to any of the old timer wrestlers from like the 70s and 80s, and they will tell you stories about fans waiting outside arenas with guns and knives and all kinds of things, just waiting to attack people. And in fact, my great grandfather, when Macho Man Randy Savage was walking to the ring one time, my grandfather was in the audience. It was like an untelevised show, so it was more like what would be considered nowadays a house show. My grandfather or great grandfather took and packed some ice really, really, like packed it together really, really tight in a cup. And then as Savage walked by, he pegged him in the back of the head with the cup, possibly, and I'm pretty sure, busting him open. So fans attacking wrestlers isn't uncommon in wrestling, and it happens quite often. But the reason I think the venue and the venue owners got so afraid to let wrestling continue there after that incident is because not that long ago, like maybe 4 to 5 months ago, maybe a little less, something like that, Raja Jackson, Rampage Jackson's son, he was at a wrestling event, an independent wrestling event, and he was live streaming. And apparently before the event, this wrestler named Psycho Stu thought that Raja Jackson was kind of in on the workings of wrestling and kind of like agreeing to work some kind of angle with him. But I guess Raja thought that Psycho Stu took it too far when he smashed, I think, a beer can on Raja's head, and Raja didn't even flinch. obviously trying to intimidate the guy, saying, "Oh, that stuff might work on a wrestler, but it ain't going to work on me," which I understand. He kind of wants to protect his uh, reputation as basically a genuine badass. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I understand it. But later on in the show, Raja's on like live stream and he just keeps talking over and over again, out loud, by the way, and to his live stream audience, that he's gonna f a wrestler up. He's gonna show him what a real beating is like and all this, and literally keeps telling people, "You're gonna see me f up a wrestler. Pay money to see me knock him out," and stuff like that, super chats and all the donations or whatever to really f him up and stuff. And shortly before the match, or possibly before the event, one of the wrestlers pulls Raj aside and says, "Hey, you need to get your receipt back. You need to, and for those in the uninitiated or just not in the loop or in the know, what a receipt is basically a wrestler's way of getting back at another wrestler for, stiffing them or really hitting them a little too hard. You know what I mean? Kind of like almost trying to knock a guy out. So usually, I mean, pretty effing frequently, a receipt is just, okay, you hit me too hard, so I'm going to hit you too hard back. Or you hit me too hard, so I'm going to confront you in the locker room and we're going to talk it out or fight it out or whatever. But Raja jumps into the ring, lifts the guy up, Psycho Stu up, and just like slams him down on the mat, essentially knocking him out. And then from there just proceeds to wail on his face, fracturing both his upper and lower jaw, and I think some other doing some other damage to his face. I can't remember exactly the details because this was, like I said, several months ago. But he does quite a bit of damage to him, to the point where several wrestlers had to jump in the ring and pull Raja off him and kind of de-escalate the situation, considering Raja took it way too far. And I think the repercussions of that was the venue owners deciding, hey, if this kind of stuff is going to go on in wrestling, just constantly, because like I said, that Raja Jackson incident was only several months ago. If stuff like this is going to keep ramping up in wrestling, we can't have it here in our venue where we hold like sporting events and concerts and things like that. We don't want to ruin the reputation of our venue. So they kind of put their foot down. And I mean, honestly, it would be bad for their business if incidents like that continue to occur. I can completely understand where the company is or I can completely understand where the venue is coming from. Makes total sense to me. And yeah, I mean, there are certain things you can and can't get away with, and stuff like that is just, it's the kind of things you can't get away with, is fabricating a story about somebody getting stabbed just to save your own ass, essentially. That's ridiculous and it's disgusting, but it's nothing new. People have done it since the beginning of history, probably, but I mean, they've been doing it for eons, I'm sure. But speaking of, I spoke about something that was a fabrication. I want to talk about something that honestly at this point is still just rumor and speculation, but I think it does have a lot of weight to it, especially when I read you this article, because this is from someone who I think is a very reputable source, someone who kind of knows WWE's workings better than pretty much anybody else that used to work for the company that no longer does. And I'm going to be taking a look at this article from CagesideSeats.com. And like I said, giving credit where credit is due. The article in question says Jim Ross thinks Vince McMahon is returning to WWE and will be part of WrestleMania 42. And it says in the article that Ross explains his theory on why Vince McMahon will return to the WWE sooner rather than later. And so it's a little bit of a, not necessarily clickbait, but that's a little bit of an incentive to either keep listening or I guess try to look this up for yourself. I'm not sure which you would prefer, but hopefully you prefer the former than the latter, because I know I don't have a soothing voice, but I've always been told I have a face for radio and podcasting, so plenty of pro wrestling fans raised their eyebrows after WWE wrestlers Cody Rhodes and CM Punk made references to Vince McMahon on two of the most recent episodes of Raw. I don't watch WWE and I haven't in a long time, as I've discussed in episode 1, so I'm curious to see what they did or if it's even reported. But let's continue, shall we? It says Vince has also been in the news after some of Triple H or Paul Levesque's 2023 texts to WWE CEO Nick Khan were revealed in the ongoing shareholders lawsuit, where Levesque sounds anxious and frustrated with McMahon's continued involvement in WWE creative. I completely understand where Triple H is coming from on this. Vince McMahon does not need to be involved with anything, not just pro wrestling. He doesn't need to be involved in anything but a freaking prison cell. And I'll go over why in just a moment. But here's what Ross said on his Grilling JR podcast when asked by his co-host Conrad Thompson if he thinks there's a chance that Vince will return to WWE. He says, "Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. I don't even have no question in my mind. It is an old cliche, where there's smoke, oftentimes there's fire, and there's been a lot of smoke regarding VKM and WWE and what his future may or may not be and how Vince can still contribute. He's a big picture guy, and that takes a lot of detail work and planning, but he can do that. He can make all of that happen, and you know he's hungry. You know that he's making pies, so we know he's in the kitchen. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Vince will be instrumental in this year's WrestleMania as far as creative is concerned. Vince McMahon returning to WWE is the worst possible idea in the world, but Vince McMahon having any sort of input on anything, again, baffling that this man is not serving consecutive life sentences in prison for the stuff that he's been accused of. And I'll get to that in just a moment, like I said, but I want to cover the reason why people are speculating that he's going to come back. And it's because TKO has done such a piss poor job with WWE that WrestleMania ticket sales and orders and stuff like that are extremely low. Probably the lowest they've been in I don't know how long, but very low, like record lows essentially. And they've been charging extremely high prices for just tickets to their live events and things like that, to the point where people are starting to basically like protest and boycott in droves the WWE, because they're like, I want to watch wrestling, but I don't want to keep watching this crap. A lot of the internet wrestling community, or IWC, have kind of turned the corner on Danhausen, which I'm kind of glad to see, because I like Danhausen. I think he's a good wrestler. I just don't think he's a great wrestler, and that's because Danhausen can't really wrestle more than just a little bit. I think he's even mentioned that in several interviews, if not one with Chris Van Vliet. But I digress. I want to talk for a moment or two about some of the things that Vince McMahon has been charged with. And honestly, the reason why I feel like this bears mentioning is because I think a lot of people have forgotten what Vince McMahon has been accused of, and the evidence isn't circumstantial. It's pretty damning evidence if you ask me, but I'm just somebody who grew up in a household watching Judge Judy and Judge Joe Brown almost my entire childhood. What do I know? I'm obviously not a legal counsel or anything like that, but I do have some pretty well-informed opinions. Vince McMahon has been accused of sex trafficking, prostitution, like forcing Janelle Grant, I think is her name, into prostitution with pro wrestlers that are signed to WWE, just to keep them from like leaving the company or like not renegotiating their contracts and things like that. He's been accused of sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, anything with the word sexual in it, pretty much. Um, it got so bad that he was charged alongside, I think, John Laurinaitis for pretty much the same stuff, sexual abuse and things like that, of the things that they did with Janelle Grant. And I don't want to get into all the details of it, but there is a portion where it exclusively mentions scatological play, which, for those who don't know, is having sex while playing with defecation or defecating on someone. And yeah, forcing her to lay down and receive his defecation and things like that. So the stuff he's been accused of is very heinous. There's a whole lot more, I'm sure. I just can't really think of it right now, and I don't necessarily have the article in front of me, nor do I really want to go look at it because it makes my stomach churn. It's very disgusting. But everyone just seems to be kind of ignoring this, and they're like, oh, he's returning to WWE. Well, what about the crap that he's done? What about the stuff that he's still fighting a legal battle for? The only thing I can think is that either he has people with, who are willing to help him financially, because I don't think he's as rich as he was when WWE cut him loose, and I'm pretty sure he lost a lot of that money in his divorce to Linda, if I'm not mistaken, or separation, something like that. I can't remember the exact details of that. But yeah, a lot of people seem to just gloss over what he's done. And that to me is baffling, that people are just like completely ignorant to that. Now they're like, what? Vince, what? He's returning to WWE? Who cares about his past, right? Come on now. He's got to be held accountable for the stuff he's done. Otherwise, other people are going to start seeing, oh, if Vince can get away with it, maybe I can too. And then it's just going to start happening at a more accelerated pace, to the point where it won't even be safe to go outside 3 feet outside your door without encountering some psychopath who's got nothing but ill will and bad intentions in mind when they come across you. And that's honestly not a society that I think anyone wants to be a part of. Certainly not a society that I want to be part of. Definitely have some reservations about that, because stuff keeps happening and it's kind of shifting the focus and attention away from one or two things, because something even more grand or extravagant, or just something more juicy has come along, you know what I mean, to pull focus and attention and public opinion that way, instead of looking at what's going on. And it's disgusting, because it's basically a simple sleight of hand. Look over here at the left hand while the right hand does this. You know what I mean? It's stupid. You can't just ignore stuff and let things go to the extreme that they have gone with, not just Vince McMahon, but with society in general. Things have gotten so out of control. But this is a wrestling podcast, so I'm going to try to stick to that. One thing I wanted to mention real quick is something that I love to do that's been a pastime of mine for at least the past decade, maybe a little more, is I like to get on YouTube and I'll watch wrestling, like what I consider to be historic wrestling moments, or memorable wrestling moments, or just wrestling matches, or things that I can't get enough of, you know what I mean? And I will be completely honest and completely fair. A lot of the things I watch are WWE related, and not from like the WWE, not just from the WWF days, but I also watch stuff from the WWE days. Some, not all, I don't really watch the matches anymore. I can't. It's too much. A lot of wrestling nowadays, even AEW and a lot of the indies and stuff like that, it's becoming far too choreographed, to the point where you can watch a match and literally see one guy waiting for another guy to jump at him, or to kick him, or to do a power slam and reverse him, or just, it's getting way too theatrical and way less sports sports oriented and like competitive, you know. And at least during the Attitude Era, yeah, there was a lot of storylines and stuff, but when wrestlers got between those ropes, it didn't look like they were just okay, and I'm gonna slam you, and you're gonna slam me, and let's both climb up on the top rope and stand there and kind of keep looking around to make sure we're not gonna fall and look like we're fighting, you know, look like we're throwing punches at each other that even a toddler could absorb like it's nothing, and then one of us is gonna go flying off, or both of us, or what have you. And one of my least favorite spots is there's about one or two wrestlers out on the outside of the ring, you know, standing near the apron, again on the floor, and they're just kind of like throwing fists, you know, throwing hands with each other, and they keep glancing back at the ring, waiting for another wrestler to either springboard over the middle, over the top rope, or come flying off the top rope, you know, at the turnbuckle at the corner. And it's clear that, you know, they're just, oh, that's not real. That's not a dude's not just launching himself at somebody, and then they're just gonna stand there and wait to catch him. Uh, I mean, come on now. I understand that you're supposed to try to protect your opponent and try to make it look as real and as not necessarily hardcore, but as real and as tough as possible. But everybody trying to get their cool moves in, and this acrobatic stuff is just turning into glorified shadow boxing with parkour. You know what I mean? One wrestler I do kind of have to give it up to is a modern wrestler named Samoa Joe. Anybody who's unfamiliar with him, Samoa Joe is just a great wrestler. He's got some speed for a big guy. He's got as much speed as you could have. He's got a lot of flexibility, able to hit some incredible moves, do some intelligent and some really thought-provoking stuff in the middle of his matches. And actually, one of my favorite, I guess, spots, for lack of a better term, a spot being like a segment of moves, or just like one move, or you know what I mean, a spot of a match. You know, it's just like one thing that happened in the middle of the match, and or during the match. It doesn't even have to be in the middle. One of my favorite spots that Joe does is a wrestler will climb up on the top rope, and Joe will have his back to him, and then turn around and clearly see the wrestler about to jump at him. And as soon as they jump off the top rope, he just walks away, literally puts one hand up, kind of brushes it aside, and just turns and shakes his head, and it's like, nope. And that wrestler will, you know, eat it on the ground or in the ring, on the mat, or what have you. He's just like, no, I'm not catching you. I'm not that stupid. You're not just going to leap at me and expect me to stand there. I mean, sometimes they will hit him if he's caught off guard and stuff like that, but if Joe's really paying attention when they're coming at him, you can watch him. He's just like, no, not doing it. He'll turn and be like, nope, and then shake his head, lean against the ropes, and just be like, this dude's stupid. You know what I mean? It's great to watch. I definitely get a big kick out of Joe's seeing Joe in the ring, just watching Joe's moveset and just his character, and just watching Joe in general is pretty fun. He's a great wrestler. Another one that I'm not trying to glaze too much, but he's someone I really enjoy. And since I'm talking about wrestlers I enjoy, I would be remiss if I didn't mention who I consider to be. There's a lot of talk nowadays, especially with the whole storyline of Kenny Omega versus MJF, about Kenny Omega being the god of pro wrestling. Now, Kenny's entitled to his own opinion, as are fans, but in my opinion, and this is only important to me and only matters to me, it doesn't, you know, my word is not gospel. Just because I say this doesn't mean it's factually true. It's just my opinion. I believe that the god of pro wrestling is none other than Raven, aka Scott Levy, and I will give you several examples why. First of all, this man started in, I think it was down in Florida Championship Wrestling, and he worked a lot of the territories back in the day, like over in Oregon, the Pacific Northwest. He worked in, I think he worked in Memphis. I think he's worked in possibly Dallas or Texas in general, all around, you know, the lower 48 of America, you know, excluding Hawaii and Alaska. But he kind of got seasoned and whatnot as a pro, became several different incarnations or different characters, and then he went to ECW in like 1995, January of 1995. He debuts, and the Raven character is born. And after I started watching ECW and seeing a lot of Raven's promos and a lot of his matches, and seeing the way his character kind of worked and kind of like tried to get over with the audience, and not get over like as a face, try to get cheers and stuff like that. He tried to get over by making the audience absolutely hate him, because he was obviously he was a heel. And so just some of his promo work was unbelievably on point. It was very fitting to his character. He would use little quotes here and there that he would borrow from like Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, people like that. The great poetic minds of his generation, and he would help to deliver the message of the Raven and kind of further his character, ingrain it into the minds of the fans, and be like, this is why I am the way that I am. This is why I do what I do. This is who I am. This is what I do. And one of my favorite little storylines that they had going on, kind of not necessarily a major storyline, but it was sort of a side piece storyline, was that Tommy Dreamer and Raven had a pretty intense rivalry in ECW, if not a feud, to where they would wrestle quite a bit. And I think Raven's last night in ECW, the second time, and I'll get to that in just a moment, was the only time that Dreamer pinned him and beat him. Or no, it was the end of Raven's first run in ECW, excuse me. In Raven's second run of ECW, he and Tommy Dreamer won the tag team championship, and that really popped the fans. They went out of their seats for it. Pop, by the way, is when you get, like I said, a crowd reaction. I think I mentioned in the last episode. But if you pop the fans, you really get them like out of their seats and cheering, just like, oh my God, what the hell. So there's that. Then the whole point of his first ECW run was, I'm better than Dreamer, because I think I don't think I know the storyline started with, he was brought into ECW because Stevie Richards was unable to beat Tommy Dreamer. So Richards brought in Raven, Dreamer's old high school rival. They used to be best friends but became rivals when Dreamer, I think, got on like the football team, started being more of the jock, and Raven was more of the outcast kind of loser and was picked on and teased and stuff like that. Then this fat girl from high school that had a huge crush on Tommy Dreamer, she debuted in ECW. She had debuted as Raven's valet because she held a grudge against Dreamer, but she was no longer the fat girl from high school. She was a penthouse model, Beulah McGillicuddy, and eventually she turned on Raven and joined Dreamer. But that's kind of important, but kind of not. But throughout Raven's entire run in ECW, Dreamer never pinned him until his last match in a basically loser leaves ECW match. Dreamer pinned Raven, and then within a month, something like that, Raven appeared on WCW, and WCW dropped the ball hard with Raven. They had, in my opinion, lightning in a bottle, and they just fumbled the ball on it, because they could have done so much more with the Raven character. They could have done so much more with the Raven character and the Raven gimmick, but I personally don't believe that they knew how to book the Raven character and the Raven gimmick, and I don't think they gave Scotty enough creative freedom to be able to book himself the way it should have been done, very similar to how the character was done in ECW. Now, I've since heard that Scotty had quite a bit of creative freedom in his WCW contract, but I'm pretty sure it was nowhere near the amount of creative freedom that he had in ECW. So when he left WCW, he had a 90-day no-compete clause that prevented him from signing with WWE, WWF at the time. So he returned to ECW, and I think technically broke his 90-day compete clause, and that caused a lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, he returned back to ECW. He and Dreamer became tag champions, and then they each took a different partner. And I think Raven and Mike Awesome won the championship, and then maybe Dreamer and Masato Tanaka won it, but I can't remember exactly. That's a little bit of a lesser known fact of Raven's ECW career, and I'm not as big on his second run in ECW as I am on his first run in ECW. One thing I do want to mention is that when Raven went to WWE, they dropped the ball way worse than WCW did, because he was not only relegated to mid-card status, they eventually just relegated him to like Sunday Night Heat, which is, for those who don't know, basically a B show. Like, it's very unimportant, very short run time, very few eyeballs on the channel itself and on the product. So it's not really gonna amount to anything. I think the story was, or is, or the story goes, whichever, that back when he was Johnny Polo in his first WWF run, way back before he joined ECW the first time, he and Shane McMahon were running buddies, meaning that they drove from town to town and stuff like that to the events. And he and Raven used to party, he being Shane McMahon. Shane and Raven used to party, and so Vince got really upset at that because Raven was getting Shane like intoxicated and drunk and things like that. So he decided to start punishing Raven when he came back to WWE as the Raven character. But I don't think that's confirmed. I think that's just speculation. But it makes a lot of sense when you think about how petty Vince McMahon is, and how petty the wrestling business is in general. I mean, it's ridiculous. But another reason I think Vince McMahon might be coming back to WWE is because TKO has made WWE so run down and disheveled in the fans' opinions that I think it was Pat McAfee or somebody else on a recent episode of Monday Night Raw was on the microphone telling fans, don't watch WrestleMania 42 and all that. And it's like, honestly, I think they might be trying to do the reverse psychology angle, where they know that Pat McAfee is having a negative reaction from the fans, so they think having him tell people not to watch it will entice more people to watch it just to spite him. But honestly, if the Vince McMahon reports are true, I hope that the fans actually take his advice and don't watch it, because bringing Vince McMahon back is the dumbest thing they could possibly do, and the fact that they don't see that is unbelievably stupid. Triple H at least understands that Vince is probably, he's getting up there in age, so he's probably getting up there in his memory and his brain power in general, probably starting to deplete, going down the roller coaster instead of up. So I think Triple H understands that the controversy, his retiring, or his declining health, maybe his possibly declining mental status and things like that, just, it all basically adds up to a recipe for a perfect disaster. And I think Triple H is trying to avoid that and make WWE more profitable. But I don't know. I mean, I think TKO is like the lead stockholders and board committee of WWE, so I think everything has to get approved through them first. But yeah, it's getting to be a mess. There are certain things that have happened in pro wrestling that are unbelievably detrimental to the perception of human society, because knowing that human beings can exist like this is absolutely, it's disgusting, and it makes anybody wish that those people did not exist and were in fact buried under prisons with no hope of ever seeing the light of day again, much less seeing another person. And if this whole indie wrestling stabbing being a fabrication is true, that it is a lie and things like that, that's just as despicable as some of the other things that have happened, like Raja Jackson pummeling Psycho Stu. I mean, that was messed up, and especially considering that he consistently bragged about it beforehand on live stream, essentially gives motive and reason, things like that, so that's just going to add more evidence against him, and I think he was arrested and is charged and possibly facing jail time for it, but I digress. The false reporting of the stabbing is just as reprehensible, because all it's doing is making people kind of timid to come see your show if they're just going to get attacked by a bunch of wrestlers, and then have the news report come out and say, oh, they started it, so we just finished it. And it's like, that's not entirely what happened. Again, I don't know everything that happened in this situation, but it sounds to me like they're just trying to save face by, claiming this is BS. But I guess only time will tell on that, right? Not necessarily claiming it was BS, but claiming that they were defending themselves and one of their fellow wrestlers rather. And yeah, so we got that to look forward to as time goes on, I suppose. There's been quite a bit of wrestling news just this week alone, and I apologize for not getting to everything, but a lot of things have happened to the point where I'm not sure where to direct my attention to first. Episode 5 may include some more newsworthy topics because, again, like I said, there are quite a bit of news topics that I didn't cover, and I've only covered like 3 things in this episode, I believe. But I just wanted to give kind of a rundown in my opinion on things, the current controversy in pro wrestling of Vince McMahon and the indie stabbing and things like that. So if you've stuck around to this point in the episode, then I commend you and applaud you and greatly thank you, because because I'm not necessarily the easiest to listen to, but I do appreciate people that want to listen to me and that enjoy listening to me and enjoy hearing my opinions and things like that. Like I said, I would be happy to talk with anyone in the comments, so please leave a comment. While you're at it, if you could leave a like and a subscribe, I would greatly appreciate that as well, because that really helps the video and my channel in general. And just try to go about your day with positivity and just moving forward with your best foot, you know what I mean? Trying to keep everything positive and everything good, because with so much negativity going on nowadays, it's easy to get bogged down and upset and frustrated, but that's gonna do you no good. And it's been medically proven here lately, within like the past decade, maybe a little more, that stress is a very strong leading contributor to a lot of ailments and possibly cancers and stuff. I can't remember exactly what I've read, but it was talking about the stress is very detrimental to your health. And the last thing I want is for anybody to basically have a heart attack because of stress and put themselves in an early grave because some simple stuff that they could have just not necessarily ignored, but just, whatever, gotten over. It's been like, whatever, it's not worth getting upset about. It's not worth listening to, and it's not worth putting energy into. That's why when I try to find things that, or when I do find things that irritate me and aggravate me and kind of upset me a little bit, I do my very best to start thinking about positive stuff, and not even that situation at all. I just like focus my attention elsewhere and think about things that are going to make me feel more positive and have a better outlook on my situation or just life in general, so that way I'm not some bogged down Debbie Downer, you know what I mean? Because nothing more annoying than trying to be cheerful and happy around somebody who's curmudgeon and pissed off all the time. So like I said, everybody who has stuck around at this point, you've really earned that MVP status of the podcast, in my opinion. And you've definitely earned a place in my heart. And so I know that's a little weird coming from a man, but I love you guys. And not in a romantic or sexual way. Let's be very clear about that. I also would like to take a moment to just kind of really say how appreciative and how thankful I am that I have a platform to basically put my opinions and stuff out there, and have people even listening to it and humor me enough to, kind of subscribe or whatever, and just comment and just tell me what they think, or message me and be like, hey, this, and this, this, that, and the third, and whatever. It really makes me feel happy that I kind of feel like I'm talking with people instead of at people or to people. So it makes me feel good, kind of makes me feel like I'm actually being listened to about my wrestling opinions, and engaging people with my wrestling opinions. And that's something I really look forward to. I honestly look forward to every Sunday recording and uploading a video of this podcast for y'all to listen to and just, have a good old time. But I think we're getting kind of close to the end of this episode. I want to kind of talk about a few wrestling terms because I mentioned that I was going to bring those up. And so I want to do that real quick before I end this episode. Give just a few, not a bunch or a lot, but just, a few wrestling terms so that way people can kind of be on the same page like I said before. But yeah, let's go with it, right? These are going to be a little more obscure, but definitely want to try to give the gist of the explanations of the words or whatever. Jerk the curtain is basically to wrestle on the first match of the card, and it's actually in reference to the curtain that separates the entranceway from backstage. And a wrestler commonly booked in this position is known as a curtain jerker, basically a glorified jobber. Not even a glorified jobber; they're like below a jobber. They're the person sent out there to kind of just introduce the crowd to wrestling, and not even show them what tonight's events is going to be about, the whole event or all the matches. It's just a way for these younger, inexperienced guys and girls to get some experience in front of a crowd and working with their opponents and stuff like that, and kind of getting a feel for wrestling in general. And it kind of gives people an idea of what to look for. And and another term that's obviously less commonly used in America is a Japanese term for a Joshi wrestler who's known for their attractive appearance or may be involved in the Japanese idol industry, aka an idol wrestler, which is, again, somebody who often sings songs or does modeling and photo shoots and writes books or various videos and stuff like that. I mean, perfect examples include like Takako Inoue, Maki Ito. I love Maki Ito, by the way. She is one of my favorites. Cutie Suzuki, and of course, my all-time favorite female wrestler of the modern era, Riho. She is absolutely fantastic. I love Riho. She's really fun to watch, and if anybody has a chance, I would highly recommend watching any of her matches from any promotion she's ever been a part of. She is definitely a treat. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, I mentioned a B show earlier, and honestly, thinking about it a little more, I kind of need to make a redaction. And I can't say that Sunday Night Heat was a B show, when in all actuality, it was more of a C show. And that means a C show, not SEA, but a letter C, is it's a show that has basically, like I was just talking about the curtain jerkers, it has a lot of curtain jerker and jobber matches to kind of ease wrestling's more rookies and entry level talent, things like that, kind of give them a little bit more easing into wrestling and stuff like that. And it's honestly, it's a negative term, very derogatory for placing a show below an A and a B, like the importance, and basically saying, "Oh, you're just a C show wrestler. You're not a big timer like me." And it's honestly kind of a term that people in the backstage, other wrestlers use to kind of put people down. But I digress. Something I want to mention is this is actually kind of funny because it's a new-ish term. It is the Marty Jannetty term, and what Marty Jannetty is I should say who Marty Jannetty is, because Marty Jannetty isn't just a term; he's an actual pro wrestler. And to kind of give you a history of who he was in a tag team called the Rockers with a well-known wrestler known as the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. And the reason that this term was even coined is it's in a reference to the fact that when Jannetty and Michaels formed the Rockers, they were a good tag team, a great tag team, honestly. But when they split and Michaels became a solo wrestler and Jannetty became a solo wrestler, Michaels went on to win the championship at least 4 times and a 2-time induction into the Hall of Fame, while Jannetty was released from the WWF 2 months later after the team's breakup, and he was hired and fired from the promotion because it was eventually revealed, like in shoot interviews and things like that, shoot interviews being interviews where wrestlers talk out of character and are a little more transparent about the business and things like that. It's come out later in shoot interviews and things that Marty Jannetty is a well-known partier. He did not dislike the gimmicks, as the Iron Sheik would say. The gimmicks in this case being drugs, essentially. I mean, no better way to put it than that. But that's a few terms. I want to kind of go over at least one or two more. This one I think is really important because a lot of people might see it nowadays a little more commonly than they did back in the day because the frequency of wrestling injuries. But it's basically the X sign, and that's when a referee holds up his arms in a cross manner showing an X, kind of towards like the hard camera or towards a camera in general, to kind of let the booker or the backstage people know, hey, somebody's been injured, we need medical attention immediately. And at that point, the referee is usually told to call an audible to where the match is ended or just abruptly stops right there. You know what I mean? And the wrestler who needs medical attention is immediately checked out, and they're brought to basically, if they're not able to move, they're brought to a gurney and taken to the back. If they're able to move under their own power, they're assisted to the back by medical staff and then treated once they get back there and things like that. But yeah, it's a common term that, not necessarily a common term, but it's more common nowadays to see a referee throw up a X than it was back in the day, because injuries, I don't know if they seemed less frequent, but they just, I don't know, you didn't see the X as much as you do now. But all right, I think I'm going to cover one more term and then I'm going to get out of here. And again, I thank all of you for listening to this, and just thank you so much. But this last term, it's kind of a double term. It's a sandbag or potato sacking somebody, which is basically, let's say I'm going to slam you like a scoop slam. I pick you up for a scoop slam and you don't twist your body and make it easier to lift you up and slam you down. You're kind of like you're going dead weight essentially, and causing me to expend all my energy and strength and everything to actually perform the move. And a lot of times the reason this is bad is because if you sandbag or potato sack or whatever somebody, you can actually get hurt because the move isn't being executed properly and precisely, so you can land awkwardly or funny, or just something can go wrong that causes a lot more damage and injury than what would have normally caused. And then, the referee will throw up the X. But yeah, thank you everybody for sticking around, listening to the podcast and listening to this episode. I'll be back next Sunday with another episode. And I'll try to cover some more news, but I think I'll only get to a couple of topics simply because there's just quite a lot of it to cover almost every week. There may even be a lot of news stuff to cover next week. But anyway, I thank you guys and girls and everybody who just sat down and decided to listen to the jar. And, you know, have a good day. Like I said earlier, try to have a good one.